Welcome to Interfaith Views and Issues, a program designed towards establishing tolerance and better understanding among different faiths and cultures. I'm your host, Shafayat Muhammad, and with me in the studio today is Sister Aasia, and maybe she will explain to us her full name. Do I have that correct? Aasia Esperanza?
Yes.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you with us on the show. And would you like to share with our audience your profession?
I'm an attorney.
An attorney at law. Good. And you practice law at present?
Yes, I've been practicing for over 11 years now.
Good. Let me ask you a question. I hope you can feel free to expound on it. Like, before practicing law, what was some of your experience in your job, career, or profession?
Well, I was in the Air Force for 7 years prior, and pretty much did all types of work in the Air Force. It was somewhat tied with intelligence work at times, but it was at the Pentagon doing pretty much like an over-labeled executive assistant, really.
Oh, that's very high-tech. So what made you leave that profession?
Well, I wanted to practice law.
Oh, you wanted to practice law. So would you like to share with our viewers, we got viewers all over the world, a little bit of your experience and that Air Force and your intelligence experience? Like what did you do exactly? You guys went out in the helicopters. What exactly happened?
Well,
you worked at the Pentagon.
Initially, I worked with the crew chiefs that supported Air Force One,
and for the benefit of our viewers, Air Force One, who or what?
Air Force One is the aircraft that transports the President of the United States.
Interesting. So have you been on the aircraft with the former presidents anytime?
Not during the same time that they're in the aircraft, but I have been on the aircraft. There's multiple aircrafts. There's not just one.
Okay, so you're very fortunate. You have had some interesting experience.
Interesting.
Anything else you want to share on that experience?
Did a lot of traveling, so I got to meet a lot of different cultures, know a lot of different backgrounds of people. So that was a great experience as well. Good.
So as an attorney at law, do you enjoy your profession?
I do. It's stressful at times, but I do.
And what field of law do you practice?
I'm a commercial litigator, but I also do commercial bankruptcies, Chapter 7, 11. Liquidations and reorganizations.
Good. In your and you're answering me like a real lawyer. Exactly what I asked you. That's all you're telling me. That's a good sign of a lawyer. Interesting. What attracted you to Islam? What are some of those issues? I mean, as a person who have worked on Air Force One, being a lawyer in the United States of America, and maybe I should ask you a little bit of your cultural background and where you came from, and were you born in the United States of America, etc.
Yes, I was born in Chicago, Illinois. My background, my family is from Puerto Rico and Spanish as well. But I was born and raised in the U.S. in Chicago.
Okay. Good.
What else did you ask?
What are some of those issues or practices in Islam that attracted you to wanting to study Islam and know more about Islam?
Well, to answer that, I probably should give you a little bit more background from how I was raised.
Okay.
I was raised in a very religious household. My grandmother was a missionary. My grandfather's a pastor. My mother's a pastor.
Interesting.
We're raised in the Christian faith, Baptist. So, during my upbringing, we were very much involved in. I went to seminary school with my mom.
Okay.
So I got to learn a great deal about the theology of Christianity, and I was always curious about other religions because I always found certain gaps, questions that remained unanswered as I was growing up. From a very, very young age, I didn't quite agree with a lot of things. They just didn't make sense to me, not only on a intellectual level, but on a spiritual level, just didn't make sense. So I always had questions, and I started to study in university other religions, Judaism, a little bit of Islam, Hinduism, a wide range of religions. And I think what attracted me to Islam was primarily the theology. It made a lot more sense for me.
So were you at any time contemplating to become a nun? If you spent some time in a seminary? I'm just...
Actually, yes, but I didn't believe in the Catholic faith. There's a lot of things that I didn't believe about that, and I also didn't believe in the idea of celibacy and those sorts of things between priests and nuns. So, but otherwise, yeah, that's definitely something that would have been up my alley to do.
Good, that's nice. So, on the line of those things that attract, what are some of those things you didn't agree with?
Christianity?
Yeah. Those gaps that you spoke about.
There's a few. One of the major ones are the Trinity. God and Jesus being the same. I always viewed Jesus as a prophet, just like Moses and Abraham and the others. So that was a big gap for me. I think also some of the beliefs and the relationships between Christians and Jews and also the original sin. There's quite a few of the the theologies that I don't. But those are probably the bigger ones. And God and Jesus is probably the biggest one for me.
That how could God be Jesus and Jesus be God?
Right, the Trinity. It just didn't make sense.
All right, and what in Islam attracted you?
Well,
I know there are many things in Islam that would have attracted you, but like in the very initial stage.
It was a long process, and I think I'm still at a stage now that I'm still grappling with my spirituality. But from a theological perspective, in comparison with one, I just believed in monotheism and one God. So that kind of limited me to the Abrahamic faiths, which, Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. So in comparing those three religions, the theology of Islam just made more sense. It was consistent with my beliefs even before learning of Islam, that God sends certain people here on earth to guide other people spiritually, and that was more consistent. In other words, the Prophet Muhammad that he was a prophet, that Jesus was a prophet, that all the others were prophets. It made sense, and it was consistent with that. So,
when you started studying Islam, what are some of those similarities you came across with Islam and Judaism and Christianity?
They're all the same. I think, and one of the biggest difference is ties to Jesus.
Okay.
That's, from a theological perspective, that is the biggest difference.
And the area of similarities and commonalities?
they all have the same prophets.
Mm-hmm.
They all have the same basic beliefs of the things that you're supposed to do in life. Heaven, hell. So there are a lot of similarities. Obviously, there are some differences in the practices and maybe even the traditions of what heaven and hell means,
Mm-hmm.
but generally speaking, they're very similar.
As a person who came from a background where your grandfather was a pastor, your mother is a pastor, anybody else?
That I know of, no.
Okay, your grandparent.
And my grandmother as
Your
well.
grandmother
Missionary.
is a missionary, your grandfather, your mother. If you have to tell someone, a non-Muslim, for example, about Islam, because there are a lot of people out there who believe that Islam is a cult and Islam came from nowhere and Islam is some kind of man-made crazy teachings out there. I mean, because you came from a family of the Bible, if I were to put it like that, your grandfather, your grandmother, your mother is a pastor, what would you tell a person who say that?
Well,
That Islam didn't come from anywhere. And where did Islam come from? And you know what I'm saying? People try to put down Islam like that.
I've read the Bible several times. I've
Mhm.
read the Torah. I've read the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
And all I can say to that is that if you probably read the books, as opposed to maybe some of the things that are viewed on television, or maybe even some practices and things that people may see
Mm-hmm.
and disagree with, the theology is the same. And it comes, Islam, as I understand it, comes from, probably dates back in terms of practices of what Christianity
Mhm.
and Judaism is. It's more consistent with their own practices. In other words, they haven't created, and by they I'm referring, Muslims in the practice of Islam have not created changes to how it was originally supposed to be.
So what you're saying is that Islam really and truly teaches more, or upholds more, of what Jesus and Moses, peace be upon them, thought.
Of the Jewish and Christian faith, yes. It not only in theology, but in practice today. So the practice
Islam
today,
emphasizes on the teachings of Jesus and Moses in all practicality.
yes.
Interesting. What I want to discuss with you when we come back, we got to go on a short break. Time just catches up with us. I want to find out some of those things or areas that you find disturbing in the Muslim world now that you have read Islam and the Quran and studied and have that balanced understanding. What are some of those things that Muslims do which misrepresent the Quran and Islam? Because that's an important thing. It's important for Muslims to know that, where we are going wrong and what we need to do and what we are doing wrong by misrepresenting the Quran. So we're going to talk about that when we come back, inshallah, God willing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, viewers, you have been viewing Interfaith Views and Issues, a program designed towards establishing tolerance and better understanding among different faiths and cultures. And today, our guest is Aasia Esperanza, and she's an attorney at law, and when we return we will be touching on some very interesting issues with her, inshallah, God willing.
Subhanallah. Tune in to Who's Who in America and in your community, hosted by Sister Naima Khan Ghani, with extraordinary guests every Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. on www.AL-HIKMATLIVE.com.
ولا إله إلا الله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر والله أكبر.
Tune in for Friday Khutbah at 1:30 p.m. broadcasting live from Darul Uloom Institute, Pembroke Pines, Florida, on Al-Hikmat TV online.
जश्न आमद रसूल Allah.
Tuning to Young Muslim Talent in America, hosted by Salma Muhammad with talented kids from all over America, every Saturday night at 8:30 p.m. on www.alhikmatlive.com.
Oh, Jashne Amade Rasool. Allahi Allah.
Thinking of doing Sadaqah Jariyah for your near and dear ones? We recommend you to sponsor the Origin of True Islam brochure, the Genealogy of Prophets, or the surahs and zikr to be recited daily as Sadaqah Jariyah for your parents who have passed away. Or you could sponsor one of the items for yourself, fi sabilillah. For more details, contact the Al-Hikmat office at 1-800-804-0267 or 954-986-0158 or email us at alhikmat@alhikmat.com.
Welcome back to Interfaith Views and Issues, a program designed towards establishing tolerance and better understanding among different faiths and cultures. Again, I'm your host, Shafayat Mohammed, and with me in the studio today is Sister Aasia Esperanza, and it's a pleasure having her with us in Al-Hikmat TV. And now we continue on a very interesting aspect of her life and experience with Christianity, Islam, and her becoming a Muslim and practicing Islam. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Now, tell me, we ended on that note pertaining to issues that you would have experienced or you would have seen in the Muslim world that is not really consistent with what Islam teaches, with what the Quran has taught us, or what the Prophet ﷺ has taught us. What are some of those issues? And I want you to say that not because it's negative, not because it's in any form of criticizing, but from a very optimistic point of view, in the sense that our viewers out there will know as Muslims where we should better our lifestyle and where we are misrepresenting Islam and the Quran.
Sure. It's interesting that you asked that question, because I think I'm myself at a crossroads spiritually because of that question.
Interesting, interesting.
And
we didn't plan that. That's how God makes things happen.
No, not at all.
Good.
And well, the thing is, I don't claim to, be a theologian in Islam or know everything about Islam, or Christianity, or Judaism for that matter. But I always try to take the positive things from each of those religions, and they all do have positive things, and they all have negative things. And I think what I've experienced, and it's been, what now, over 5 years, I guess, is that there's a few things. On the one hand, and maybe, I don't know if this is here where we are in South Florida, that could be very different from other parts of the world, or even other parts of the United States, but it was very difficult. Unlike Christianity, where Christianity, I think Christians tend to really go out there and seek out people to convert, to bring to the faith. What I experienced with Islam is it was so hard for me to get information. It was so hard initially for me to make that contact, with Muslims, because I felt like an outcast. It wasn't very welcoming at first. I think.
Now that's why we have this show. Now you'd understand. That's one of the reasons why Al-Hikmat TV has decided to have a program like this, and have programs like this, to deal on issues, so that people like yourself who would experience those problems or after studying Islam would find avenues and ways, and by people listening to you will know that it's not the fault of Islam or the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but it's the fault of the people, the followers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I want to make a caveat to that, because there were some amazing people, Muslims that I met. Brother Zayed, being one of them. He was the most open, welcoming, person that I had ever met. You were very open. Now, to get to you, I had to, meet with over 10 other sheikhs and Maulannas, that I didn't really have the ability to talk to as openly as I have been with you. But, there are those exceptions. But as a whole, it was very difficult. So it had to come from the convert, I guess, or from the non-Muslim to really want that information. And I think that's probably something that's very important, that when you have a non-Muslim coming to get information, it's because they really, really want it. They're really seeking it out because it's not so easily available.
Right. And then the people don't make themselves available.
And then, you come to the masjid or the mosque, and again, there are those exceptions, but generally as a whole,
the majority of people are not very welcoming.
No.
Or they don't make themselves available.
Well, just, you don't feel a part of what's
okay.
going on. You feel really like an outcast. And I guess that's a difficult thing. But at the same token, I think the spirituality comes from the individual within. And
But do you know of other new Muslims who have experienced the same thing?
They all say the same
Interesting.
thing.
Wow.
Those that I've met, anyway. And for others, I guess...
So the Muslim community really need to do something about that. We really need to make some extra effort in going the 9 yards to entertain or to welcome and help educate or bring more into the fold, or maybe spend more time with people who come into the fold of Islam. Huh?
And that wasn't like a big issue. It's a problem initially, because I think unless the person has a really deep desire to get the information, they're probably going to leave. They're probably not going to want to seek it out. So for that reason, I say it. But I think what some of the things that distracted me or kind of set me back, maybe have me at the point where I am now, which is not, fully there as I was before, and are just some of the practices.
Like what?
People would come up to me. I'm new, and clearly I'm just silly things. I don't really want to get.
Let's talk about a few issues, for example, like.
Well, it's just a difference in what the faith may really be. For
Right.
example, I was teaching a class for children at the mosque.
Yeah.
And some of the kids would not be allowed in the class because I was the one teaching the class, as I understood it. And kids would tell me things. I would hear things from kids like they couldn't touch dogs, or they couldn't, or I would have someone come up to me, and if I had nail polish, and say you can't pray, or those types of things that I would always ask my normal question, where do you get that from, so that I could look it up and I could get a better understanding myself. And there's no place, it may come from some of the hadiths, for example, relating to the dogs, but when I read the hadith, it really doesn't say that, but it's interpreted that way as a negative. And I think a lot of the practices are kind of taken to an extreme and misinterpret a lot of practices
so
without looking at the time.
What was some of the reason why certain kids were not allowed to come in your class? Because you're a convert or a new Muslim or something?
Right, exactly. As I understood it.
Interesting.
But those were very extreme exceptions. But I think just the idea that converting or learning Islam precludes you from having an understanding of it, you know, it's just not a good thing to believe.
So you find that people emphasize a lot on issues that are not really mentioned in the Quran.
Nowhere
or issues that are not emphasized in the Quran, the people emphasize more on the issues that the Quran did not discuss.
Yeah, and like another,
which is very interesting.
That's true, and another thing is,
and that's an issue that has damaged people in the past.
A very difficult issue that I had, and you somewhat hit it on the nose by mentioning the Quran, is there's a deep hatred, you know, to a certain degree, and I want to just continue to say these are exceptions as opposed to.
No, that's why you're thinking aloud. That's what the show is all about. Feel free, issues and views. So
because there's many Muslims that don't feel this way.
No. This show is all about views and issues. So you're free to express your views on different issues. That's what the show is all about.
Well, it's just I guess the feeling towards Jews. Mm-hmm. That's really high on the list in terms of I see through that a lot of negativity, a lot of hatred that boils in people that are, you know, really lovely people, but then when you have that side that comes out in different ways, it's very disturbing.
And again, that's very political, very cultural.
Oh,
it
yes.
is not Quranic.
Not at all.
Because if it was Quranic, Allah will not tell us that you could eat from the people of the book,
right.
The Jews and Christians.
Oh yeah, but certain portions of the Quran are really misinterpreted,
yes,
taken out of context historically.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
To perpetuate those ideas.
People have twisted it as opposed to what it really was meant for. Yeah, that's a sad situation. Very, very sad. And I really wish if our Muslims in the world could really better understand some of these issues, we would be able to motivate more people to be better Muslims, or more people to become Muslims. Don't you think so?
No, I do, because when, like I said, when you study the theology, it makes a lot of sense. And I think for me, this is me on a personal level, I've seen a lot more practice from hadiths than from the Quran. And I kind of like to keep myself more towards the Quran, and I think that's probably where I'm at now in terms of not finding that practice of Islam in the bigger sense, you know.
And it's not that anything is wrong with the hadith, but people elaborate and twist the meaning many a times to suit the agenda that they want to concentrate on.
Exactly.
And then it gets beyond what Allah is saying in the Quran. And there are a lot of times it conflicts with the message of the Quran when people go so much to elaborate on that extent of what they want to understand from the hadith. And hence the Quran in many areas have left certain things vague and did not discuss it because Allah did not want us to get into details with certain issues. Correct. And we do just the opposite.
It's the opposite, because even if you have something that is clear in the Quran on certain issues, they'll, you know, I've seen the hadith taken to override what's in the Quran very clearly. So that's something that I find inconsistent with the practice.
And I agree with you because that's a problem. You see it in the Muslim world where a lot of the people really elaborate and a lot of, I mean, I don't want to get into the issues, but because we are on views and issues, we could talk on the issues and we can express our views, but I mean, I don't want to because we have viewers from all over the world on this Al-Hikmat TV, but again, feel free to express your views and talk about, like, for example, I look at the political situation in Muslim countries. Think about that. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came and taught people leadership. You know, how to correct a country in a situation. And some of the most corrupted people in the world, most corrupted politicians, you find them in the Muslim countries.
I mean, not getting into politics. Politicians all over the world are corrupt, but
one guy told me that when I mentioned this statement in a lecture. I said, look at the Muslim politicians. And he said, well, politicians are like that all over the world. I said, yes, but Islam came for a different reason. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came, people were corrupted. But the message of the Quran was to correct them. And if Muslim politicians in Muslim countries and Muslim scholars in Muslim countries cannot propagate and guide the people according to the Quran, then what's the difference?
That's true. And I think the problem with that is that different portions of the Quran or hadiths or whatever, and this is true with Christianity and Judaism and anything else, but things are taken out of context to fulfill an agenda, and very much so you see it in the political scheme, not only in Muslim countries, but in Christian countries, and you see that conflict over what they try to say as religion, but really it's not. It has nothing to do
Definitely.
with the
I tell people the same thing about the Palestinian-Israel issue and the land and all this problem. It's nothing Islamic, it's nothing biblical from the Torah or the Quran, because it's one people. They should live together as brothers and sisters, worshiping the same God, and there should be harmony. That's what Abraham, peace be upon him, is all about. That's what his family was all about. But again, it gets political, and human beings do, if I would want to put it like this, butcher or crucify the message of the scriptures, and we do our own things. And that's the problem we have in Islam. And I want to thank you very much, really, for being with us on this show. And as we conclude the program, do you have any comments or remarks for a couple of seconds to say to our viewers?
Well, thank you for having me. I'd just like to say that just putting together everything that you've already stated, I think these types of conflicts between the religions and the people practicing these faiths really not only keep people away from practicing religions, but or the particular faith, but practicing religion altogether. And I think that's a disfortunate thing, very
Right.
unfortunate.
Well, thank you very much again. And for viewers out there, we have been speaking to Sister Aasia Esperanza, with a very interesting background. She's an attorney at law and has had an experience of working with or on Air Force One, and now in the research and study of Islam, has accepted Islam and is very much in the learning and teachings of the Quran. And those of you who must have tuned in now, you would have seen and heard from her background and her studies in Islam. So thank you for viewing Interfaith Views and Issues, a program designed towards establishing tolerance and better understanding among different faiths and cultures. Again, I'm your host, Shafayat Muhammad, and do tune in next week, same time, same station. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.